once considered as the brightest and, of course, the biggest economy in the world, has become a sore spot now as the GDP growth rate spirals down to a meager 5.7%. Well, is this really Achedin? Surely not. But what's causing this ailment? Is it the demon of demonetization or GST? Our executive editor of news, Supriya Srinath, and managing editor Sandeep Gurumurthy asked this question to the vice chairman of NITI Aayog, Rajiv Kumar. Listen in to the excerpt of this exclusive interview.
On the Indian economy and the growth, I think we should look at it as the as a sort of downturn, cyclical downturn, which started in the last 2 years of the UPA government. This is something that we must note actually that this is not something that this government it is not coterminous with this government's coming into office, but the last 2 years the UPA had handed over an economy which had already started to slow down, and where the exuberances, or if you like the excesses of the previous years, where credit was given to all sorts of projects and all sorts of, if you like, infeasible investments, had begun to take a toll on the overall macroeconomic situation in the economy. So, but what I am very happy to say is that I think this downturn, the cyclical downturn, is now coming to an end. The economy seems to have bottomed out in July, July 2017. And by the way, just one other additional fact, which is that if you remember, everybody has been talking about excess capacity in the industry and in the manufacturing sector in the economy for the last 2.5, 3 years. So if you have excess capacity, you can't expect private investment to go up. But for the first time after July, the PMI in manufacturing is beginning to look up from 47 to I think 51, and the PMI in services too has registered a similar increase. And just one other final thing, which is that the real estate prices are beginning to perk up at long last in some of the metros, and our exports have shown a rise, though not as strong as we would like, in the last 12 months. They're well below their peak, which they reached 2011 I think, but now they're beginning to rise consistently over the last 12 months. I cite all these figures to say we should not think about a structural downturn or a tailspin or disaster scenarios, etc. Yes, we have had a secular decline, but that's a cyclical downturn that we had inherited and that has continued until now.
Fair point, and I think you've sort of, in a sense, elaborated why you believe a revival is around the corner. But the more immediate concern, Dr. Kumar, is, and you've touched upon it as well, there is concern in the economy on what's going to happen in the next quarter. I know governments can't plan policy keeping quarters in mind, but for corporate India and from a job creation point of view as well, there is a more concern on what's going to happen immediately. What is your own view on what's going to happen in the next quarter? Because, for example, the former Finance Minister Palaniappan Chidambaram is of the view that growth might actually even drop below 5.7%. I know you are far more optimistic. How much of a revival do you see in the next quarter more immediately, and what could be factors contributing to that revival?
I think we would have a fairly smart revival. One is not talking about the so-called V-shaped recovery. I would not expect the economy to get onto a sort of 7-8% growth path, sort of level just now. But given the fact that all the destocking which had taken place in anticipation of the GST is over and behind us, given the fact also that, as I said, finally the private builders have now come around to take advantage of the financial concessions that the government is offering for affordable housing, which is below around 30 square meters, and they're beginning to take up those projects. Also the fact that the automobile sector is now registering a growth, and the festival season is upon us. I would have thought that the July to September, October would register a marginal increase and will take us up above 6%, but then the third quarter is when the recovery would gather speed, and we will probably go to 7% during the third quarter, which will have the festival season within it, and as the economy, then the private sector investment also begins to pick up.
I do want to shift focus and talk about another issue that has been in the public domain. We at ET Now are big champions of that. We understand that perhaps this is a cyclical downturn. This is going to be, the worst is perhaps behind us. But as the Indian economy begins to pick steam, there is this clamor for the government to handhold. There is this clamor for a fiscal stimulus, for some sort of a lifeline and help for the government to step in with. Why do you believe it's necessary right now?
Supriya, can I answer the question in two parts? See, one, I think there is a lot that government can do and is now planning to do to facilitate private investment and to remove some of the bottlenecks, to remove some of the irritants, to remove some of the sort of things which come in the way of clearing the projects, etc. And that itself would enable private investment to come along and to gather a little bit more speed, But the other thing that the government needs to do is also to take care of its own expenses. Now, I know, for example, there are several ministries in the government which are not being able to spend whatever has been allocated in this budget. In some cases, quite unfortunately, I think the expenditure is below the level that has been done in the previous year. There are a large number of vacancies even at the cutting edge which have been left unfilled, which will improve public delivery of public services. Now, all of those do not require any additional fiscal stimulus, and yet will see a larger outgo of government finances into the economy, and also will debottleneck a large number of projects in the infrastructure sectors especially. The second, though, part which is, I think, perhaps equally important is that at a time when the recovery is about to begin, it will be good for the government to give it a little push by putting in an extra stimulus, whatever it can afford. And what it can afford is something that I have actually held very clearly for some time, is should be determined by not looking at the fiscal deficit number and not getting bogged down by that, but looking at the revenue deficit number. And I believe strongly that the revenue deficit target should be met. In fact, if possible, even improved upon by measures, like direct benefit transfers, by cutting out all the leakages in your subsidy payments, and by doing the jam trinity, etc. So, if the revenue deficit is reduced and brought down, and the rest of the government expenditure goes into capital productivity enhancing expenditure, I think there is no harm at all at this point in busting the FRBM target that the government may have set upon itself. After all, the FRBM law does permit a 0.5% sort of expansion above the target in case of the economy needing it.